is going on, gaming nerds? Welcome back to Midnight Gaming with Mr. Designare. Thanks for coming to the channel and hanging out. Hopefully you guys are having an amazing day. I'm having a pretty decent day. It is midnight. Yet again, we are back on Russian Fishing 4. Okay, so today, as you guys know, I hang out in M-Dog's gaming channel on Russian Fishing 4. I also catch his streams whenever I can, and I watch his YouTube videos. Links in the description below. If you don't know who that is, you guys can go check him out. Awesome content. Okay, now if you guys didn't know this, I actually do YouTube videos as well, if you guys didn't know this. So about a couple of days ago, M-Dog actually started talking about one of the videos that I had done that specifically referenced gear ratios. Okay, and they talked a little bit about gear ratios in his stream, and a question came up between two specific reels. Now, as you guys probably don't know, or do know if you watch the videos, when it came down to the gear ratios, basically all I said was the one with the higher gear ratio is the faster reel. And that is actually true. But the strange thing, the kind of enigma when it comes down to these two reels, is one of the reels is actually slower when it comes down to the gear ratio than the other one. But it's actually faster when it comes down to reeling in fish. Okay, let's actually look at the two reels that I'm actually talking about. The first one is the Megara. Now, as you can see, this is the Megara. Beautiful reel, nice looking, likes long walks on the beach, Netflix and chills, and most importantly, reeling in fish nice and low and slow. The biggest thing you need to take into account is the gear ratio, which is 4.7 to 1, meaning for every one rotation of the reel handle, the spool, this bad boy right here, will actually spin 4.7 times. Okay, the other one that we're looking at is the Tagara. Now with the Tagara, this one likes to live hard and fast, spends its nights at the racetrack, basically live hard, die young, right? Okay, so the gear ratio on this one is 4.2 to 1, meaning for every rotation of one rotation of the handle, the spool will spin 4.2 times, which makes it sound like this one's actually slower than the Megara. But when it comes down to it, this one is actually faster than the Megara. Why is that? Well, I'll show you a visual in a second, but for the most part, what it comes down to is one simple sentence, okay? Even though the Megara has a faster gear ratio, the spool on the Tagara is larger, which allows it to pull in more line per rotation than the Megara. And that's how the Tagara is actually faster. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a diagram that one of the guys that actually hangs out in M-Dog's channel, he goes by the name of Cole S on the game. Send him a message, tell him thanks for this. On Twitch, he actually goes by Cole RF4 when he hangs out in M-Dog's chat. So thank you for this diagram. Here's your overall diagram. Okay, basically what it comes down to is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to black all of this math out so it doesn't confuse you. Basically what it comes down to is if this top spool right here can be representative as the Tagara, the bottom spool here is representative of the Megara. Now, one second, let's go back to the game. If you actually look at the Megara or the Tagara, what I'm doing here is I'm referencing in the diagram, we're referencing the spool. So when I say the spool, this is the spool that I'm talking about on the actual reel. Some people mistake when I say spool to be like a line. You know, like this is a spool of line. I'm not talking about this. I'm actually talking about the actual reel itself. And I'm talking about this piece right up here. Okay, so what we're actually going to be looking at in the diagram is if you cut off this top right here and remove that top, and then you look down on the actual reel itself, this is the circle that we're looking at right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the diagram. All right, so now that we're now back to the diagram, this top spool right here is representative of the Tagara. This bottom one is the Megara. Okay, now the Tagaras is a gear ratio of 4.2 to 1. The Megara's is 4.7 to 1, so it sounds like the Megara's should be faster, right? Basically, here's kind of the way this goes. If you take a piece of fishing line and you wrap around that fishing line around the spool once, let's say that the Tagara takes 6 inches to wrap around the spool once, okay? With the Megara, it takes 3 inches of line to wrap around the spool once. So every time that this spool goes around, it is going to wrap double the line around the Tagara's spool compared to the Megara's spool. And that is basically it. Okay, so even though the Tagara has a slower gear ratio, which is 4.2 to 1, and the Megara has a faster gear ratio, meaning the spool spins around faster than the Tagara's, the larger spool of the Tagara pulls in more line per rotation. Okay, and that is basically it. That is how the Tagara is faster. Now, let's go ahead and let's say that we're going to pretend that both of these reels have the exact same gear ratio. And we're going to say that gear ratio is 7.1 to 1, meaning for every 1 rotation of the handle on the reel, the spool is going to spin around 7.1 times. So for you math people that want proof of this, that this bigger spool pulls in more line, that's basically your setup, is 7.1 to 1 gear ratio on both of these, okay? Now, let's go ahead and look at this up here. So if we say that 6 inches of line is what it takes to wrap around this spool once. Okay, so you take that line, you wrap it around once, and you measure it. It says 6 inches of line to go around the spool once. How will we find out how much line it's going to pull in during the gear ratio of spinning 7.1 times? We take 6 inches of line times 7.1 spins equals 42.6 inches, centimeters. It doesn't really matter. This is hypothetical, okay? Now, if we look at this one only takes 3 inches of line when you wrap once around it. So to figure out how much this actually pulls in 7.1 turns, you take 3 inches, which is how much it takes to wrap around it, and you times it by 7.1, which becomes 21.3 inches or centimeters, whatever. So as you can see, even though the Megara is smaller and has a faster speed when it comes down to how many times it turns, the larger one will pull in more line. Okay, so this will pull in 42.6 inches. This will pull in 21.3 if they have the exact same gear ratio. If not, even though the Tagara is slower at 4.2 to 1 gear ratio and the Megara is faster at 4.7 to 1 gear ratio, because the larger spool wraps around more line per rotation, it is going to be faster than the Megara. And I hope that makes sense. Now, that's pretty much the overall explanation. Cole, thank you for the diagram, but I'm going to blow you guys' mind a little bit more. If you guys are done with the explanation, you can go ahead and click off the video. If not, you want me to blow your minds a little bit more, here you go. Technically, as you put more line on a spool, it makes the spool larger and larger. So if you cast out and you start reeling in, as you put more line onto your spool, you're actually making the spool larger. And as you make the spool larger, it increases its speed on how fast it pulls in fish. So it actually increases its speed exponentially. And the larger the spool gets, because there's more line on the spool, the faster the reel actually reels. So take that idea, stick it in your craw, slap your mama for me, and think about it, because that's a pretty cool idea. All right? If you liked the video, hit the like button. If you didn't, don't hit it. Just make sure no matter what you do, subscribe. I really hope that I can explain that really well for you guys and show you how one reel, which seems like it would be slower than another because of its gear ratio, can actually end up being faster. So hopefully that worked out for you. Keep gaming, keep doing it midnight. Have a blast. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care. Have a good one. And bye-bye.